Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Neil Smith, joined by my co-host Aaron Magnuson. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, so we are going to have a fun conversation about the rage of technology in 2023, and that is ChatGPT or OpenAI. And really, a lot of it is just even language-based artificial intelligence. AI is something that we have heard about for years, but I think all of it is always like, what is AI? How does it work? And now all of a sudden ChatGPT is like, oh, that's how it works. Like, that's amazing. That's crazy. Aaron, I'm curious your experience with ChatGPT, and maybe even how would you describe what ChatGPT is?
Yeah, it's so my experience with it is there's a lot of conversations internally at our company Pray.com with how to use it and how to leverage it, and not anything strategic yet, outside of just like I'm seeing more and more people like testing stuff and and by testing stuff I mean like, hey, let's plug in like this person and like write an email to this person for this reason, right? And so I think my one loss here, Nils, and so I'll represent the audience. I have not myself gone in and played around with it. So I've been monitoring it. I've been seeing all the people's funny tweets about how pastors are going to be using it. But essentially, from my understanding of how this works and how AI works and how this is different than maybe like a chat bot that we've talked about historically or other versions of AI. This is like the 2.0 version of all of that, where you're asking a computer that has access to, I think it's fair to say, the entire internet. So when you're asking it to write on a subject, or let's stay in the context of our listeners, if you're asking it, hey, write a sermon on Matthew chapter 16, verse this and that, instantaneously, this software, this AI will start writing a sermon based on every single data point ever on the internet. So not only does it know the scripture, it knows all the different iterations of the scripture. It also has instantaneously ingested all of the commentaries on this chapter. And it starts writing and it knows what a sermon is because of course it does. It's watched every sermon. It's heard every preacher ever that's preached this. And then it starts writing a message. Now, What gets really eerie about this is it also knows people because it can ingest anything that's on the internet about an individual, their behaviors, right. So this is where it starts to get a little eerie. But the idea would be that you can use this to respond to emails in your voice, to do lead generation emails in your voice, and, as strange as it sounds, actually match the person that you're sending it to, even if you don't know them, because the internet knows them, at least to a certain degree. And I think by now, most people have some level of a footprint on the internet or on digital, where they're able to send the tailor-made things to them with zero effort on your part. So our team has been, experimenting with this in different capacities. I know this might be outside of ChatGPT, but another thing that we're, testing is AI generated images for some of our social graphics versus stuff that we're finding off of Subsplash or, handmade, what we think would be good versus an AI generated image. And to no surprise, the AI generated images are performing better when we're doing some A/B testing on social. And I think we can probably, Nils, I think this is going to be a year where we're just actually probably giving a lot of information out around this. And it's certainly something that's taken the internet by storm, is this ChatGPT and any iteration, because they're not the only ones. They're probably the most common or most household name, if you could say that. But yeah, Nils, I'm curious if I accurately describe that, two, what you would add in to everything I just said.
Yeah, I think you described it really well. I think too, and what the conversation I want to develop or have is what's the good and the bad of this
Yes.
technology and how should church leaders approach it. But I think it is like as we're learning how it works and what it can do, just like so many other technologies, until we're starting to use it, we can't even begin to fathom what it can do.
Right.
But I think what is amazing is what it actually can do with what we've experimented with so far. So I've tested a bunch of different things. And even the graphic design part, that you're talking about is fascinating, where, somebody was showing me for like a sermon series graphic of like create a graphic of, you know, Paul cutting off the man's ear, or Peter cutting off the man's
Yeah.
ear, in a Van Gogh style art painting. And in about 30 seconds, it created that, like illustration. Um, and it was
Dude.
amazing. Or, I asked it to write a short play for a dad and a 10-year-old daughter in New York City about going to Central Park. And it created in about 30 seconds a play that my daughter and I could act out. And it was literally
Did
like,
you act it out? That's what the people want to know.
we kind of did. We didn't fully. We talked
You're
it
like,
out.
wait a second, this is literally what we do every single day. How did it know? How did it know?
Well, so then my daughter was like, can it do my homework for me? That's where she went. And it was like, so literally it was like, write a report, a 200 word essay about the American Revolution for an eighth grader. And my daughter's like, well, Dad, I'm in seventh grade. And I'm like, but you want it to sound like an eighth grade.
Right.
Sure enough, it did. It wrote it, and she's like,
Oh, the Smith household is a dangerous place to be. Every teacher's worst nightmare is the Smith's household.
but it's crazy what this technology
That's
can
right.
do. And so I think that we as we look at it, it's like, wow, like, can it write sermons? Can it do this? Can it create
Yes.
graphics? Can it
Yes.
replace our graphic designers? Can it edit videos? Can it, like, what can it do that we haven't thought of? And like, um I just it's hard, it's overwhelming to think about. And then it's like, is this going to replace jobs, and is this going to like cause other problems? So Aaron, it's still like, what is it? And I think if I probably were to compare it to another technology innovation, to me, it's probably more like search than it is social media. And so
Yeah.
it's really when Google entered the picture of, we approach the World Wide Web of, we'd have to go navigate the web to find what we're looking through basically a series of clicks. And then search was basically like, okay, it knew where everything is. And so we just learned how to search the right keywords. We could find what we're looking for, where this is now, and it aggregated all of that data. So this is now doing that of, can you not just search, but can you organize your search of all this data into this package? And so just as we have learned how to use search most
Yeah.
effectively to find, what we're looking for, just like even how we learn how to search YouTube videos to find what we're looking for, we are going to learn in the ChatGPT language. Prompts is the language that they're using, of what prompts do you need to learn how to give ChatGPT to get to then output information, or organize information that's going to then make, help you in some way. And so we'll see how that develops. And the technology is, this is like basically version one of this. Now behind the scenes there's many versions, but this is like the first version that is useful as I see
Yes.
it. And it's really useful really fast, but it's only going to become more and more useful. So the sooner we learn how to integrate it, and
Right.
find value in it, then the better prepared we're going to be for it. So Aaron, though, let's just go ahead and address the negatives of it. Like,
Yeah.
what are the pitfalls to to ChatGPT and AI technology as you see it from a ministry perspective?
I think the first thing, and I want to go here first because I think this is kind of a bridge between what is it, how does it work, and what are the pitfalls.
Yes.
And that bridge is, and you'll need to speak to this because I think that I've heard the answer to this, but I don't know for sure. The reality is this isn't a robot that created itself. ChatGPT and AI technology is still ties back to a human. Somebody created this thing, meaning this, it's has some bias still. Am I off base here, or am I correct in that there was still decisions made by a human for how this technology functions, meaning there is a bias in how it's going about answering your questions? Is that true or is that false?
I think it's I don't know. I don't know. I think there is a level of truth, but it isn't. It's a bias based on the opinions that exist on the internet, based on the data that they're able to pull. But it's not. I think at the end of the day, I think it's important to see technology as agnostic. So
Okay.
technology
But this is where it gets blurry, right? Then this is the first time where it's most, because yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I think this is like the first time, even more so than social media, because that was still being, at least what's presented, the output of social media is still from people. Now,
Yes.
what you see, there's some like, how is the algorithm? A human created that, right? Like, but this is actually producing this is like the 2.0 version of that.
Mhm.
In search, the outcomes that are coming to you is still based off of, some data, blah blah blah. But as far as something not being agnostic, this is like the first time it could feel like, man, does this robot have a bias? And I think I think it's different than search and social media. And maybe that's just perception because it's new, but it feels different this time, where it's like, yeah, I think it's 99% agnostic, but what about that 1% that is not agnostic about how it's writing and what it's presenting? And because there's still a mystery of like, it pulled from the whole internet, but how does the internet skew? And the contributors to the internet, is there a bias based on who's had the ability to, and this is a whole rabbit trail, but I would say this, Nils, is probably one of the first, as far as like the people we're talking to. Do I really want this to write my sermon for me? Or do I just want to take some of the ideas because I don't know where this came from?
Yeah. Well, and so yeah, I think the unknown of where the aggregated information comes from is definitely a concern. And so I think that will become more known over time.
Yeah.
But I think it is that definitely needs to be a flag, because even when we prepare, as I think about sermon preparations, that's probably where a lot of people are going to immediately. And you basically pick and choose. Am I gonna pull from this, these books, from these authors with this theology, or am I going to pull from these books with this theology? And I think different people have different opinions, but I do think that this is where, from my perspective, technology is going to be, we're going to be able to basically say, and in some ways basically create our own AI tool of like, look, I just want to, and I want to eliminate any information from, say, Rob Bell. Does that make sense? Into the sermon? Or I want to eliminate anything from Dallas Willard because I disagree with their stance on this, and I don't want that insight into my sermon preparation. And so we'll be able to basically define, like, I want it from a Reformed theology, or I want it from a charismatic, perspective, and I want it maybe from a King James version, scripture references. So I do think we'll actually, because the technology in and of itself is agnostic, but I do think it's a flag, at least maybe people using it too quickly, of like, hey, are we going to get lazy in our theological development? I do think it actually can expedite some of our research, but I think we got to be cautious with the theology. So I think that's a pretty significant flack of the theology. The other thing I think that I want to bring up is what is jobs, and
Yes.
purpose tied to this. And this is a bigger picture than just how it integrates into the church. But I think that a lot of jobs are going to be replaced because of this technology. And I think people have seen this in like robotics and certain technologies of like, look, we're gonna have self-driving cars and trucks, and we're gonna have
Yep.
we already have Amazon warehouses that move, so it's replacing certain jobs. But now we're replacing copywriters, graphic designers, and some of these creative jobs. Like literally, we're gonna watch movies in the future, or cartoons, and like our kids are gonna watch cartoons in the future that were written by AI, that were then just animated by AI, and
Yeah.
literally just it's all automated. And so that's going to eliminate the writers and the designers and the motion graphic artists. And so there's a lot of jobs that are going to be replaced. And when people's jobs are replaced, their purpose, their meaning is often
That's right.
then hurt. So I think even from a pastoral perspective, we're going to need to understand, how do we help uh shepherd people, care for
Yeah.
people when their livelihoods are being taken away. And a good friend of mine is a graphic designer, runs a graphic design company, and he is basically shutting it down because he's like, I can't keep up with the prices anymore. And honestly, AI graphic design is better than what my team is doing anyway. So I'd even rather use that. So I can't even justify having this business. And that's happening in 2023. And so it's hard to say where that's going to go. Yeah, so that's a significant problem I see developing out of this as well.
Yeah, and us needing to be prepared to steward that. Now, so I'm curious, even in these early stages, are are you able to tell that this was written by AI? And do you think future generations, like your daughters, like my kids, are in the same way that we can tell, okay, I went on YouTube, I searched, I am not going to watch these 5 videos, even though they've been presented to me, because I just have a feeling, this is not our generation is very search savvy, whereas we have my grandparents that are still clicking on those text messages that they're getting from they think their grandkid that's saying, help me fund this link, and they click on the link, right? Where there's just like oh no, that's spam. Like our spam radars have gotten way better over, but I'm sitting here being the old guy now, thinking, are we going to be able to tell the difference between a deep fake AI video and audio, and even like documentation in terms of like are teachers going to be able to tell when an 8th grade paper was written by ChatGPT turned in by one of the Smith daughters, or and so it makes me think about like the jobs where the pendulum, I'm already thinking about how the pendulum could swing of like, no, we're the closest comparison, and I apologize for anybody that's living outside of America, but I think about like the pride we take in American made. We did not outsource this. And like human made by humans for humans made by humans is going like, and there's going to be there's got to be some indicators, but I'm wondering if you have the side-by-side stuff. Can you tell the difference in this V1? Because I know in V5 you're probably not going to be able to tell, but version 1, can you tell the difference?
What I understand is that ChatGPT is actually documenting everything they distribute, and you will be able to then see, is this word for word taken from ChatGPT, or where was this so it's some ways even files that are generated or graphics that are created, there's going to be some kind of like almost like a watermark type of situation with the files. But and I do think we're going to have things like that, like similar to what you're saying of, this was made by humans, just like we often have, even like this is handcrafted, where I think about it in like cigars. People want it like a hand rolled cigar. Well, there's a side of me that's like, yeah, but the robot actually does a better job than the human. And so I'd rather pay half the price and get the machine rolled than the imperfect human rolled. And so are we really going to like care that much if something is done better by a robot? Because it's often like we look at cartoons done by a man, it's like, yeah, I think I actually like the robot version better because it's just better. And I think at the end of the day, this is the tension with new technology of like, look, progress is a good thing. if managed well. And so there are downsides to the progress. And so that's, I think, Aaron, even as we pivot this conversation to the positives, it's looking at progress. Like the internet, when we saw the internet, and I say we, I'm talking Christians in the church, we're often like, man, that's a place for pornography. That's a
Yeah,
place where bad things happen. And then it was like, but I guess we should have a website, and we'd kind of like battle like, but if we have a website, are we supporting pornography? Um, and the answer is no. Like we're just basically using the tools that are in front of us. And luckily now there are more things on the internet than pornography. That was just one of the first primary
totally.
uses of the internet. And then we saw things like social media, and it's like, this is bad. And this is a problem. And then it's like, oh, but it actually can help us really solve it. There are problems, but it also can solve a lot of problems. And so with new technologies, and then you see it too with like calculators. Calculators were like, you shouldn't use calculators in school because you need to learn math. And now it's like, well, when do I do math? I just use my like at the end of the day, it was better to educate on how to use a calculator than
Right.
educate it. Now, it conceptually, I get it. And I think education is a process, but at the end of the day, like I hope my kids' school teaches them how to use ChatGPT more than discourages them from using
That's
it.
right.
Because this is just a part of, like, we have to learn how to create good prompts for this technology and how to use it to accomplish our goals. So as I think about churches and how they can begin to use Chat GPT now or AI now, is the first thing I think about is in message prep. And so in like literally you can tell this, create an outline, for a sermon about Romans chapter 3. um yeah, and that's it. Or you can, create a series of prompts to clarify like how
Yeah.
you want that to be organized, and it could literally give you a full transcript. It could give you a or even a sermon for youth, for teenagers between 13 and 18 years old about, the dangers of pornography. And it really, I think, can help us in our message prep. And we just use it as part of our research, not replacing our research and not writing our sermons fully for us, but helping us in our sermon preparation,
Right.
and creating efficiency there.
In the same way that the search bar impacted your sermon prep,
Yes.
instead of just having to buy the commentary from one person, which you didn't throw those out, a pastor who's listening to this. I'm sure you didn't. It's on your book, wherever you're listening to this podcast, it's probably on the bookshelf behind you, right? It's
Yeah.
still there. And you still crack that thing open. I mean, I think about the pastors that I've worked for in previous seasons, right? Lit books littered over their desk with sermon prep, whether it's actually a commentary or whether it's just a book that they're reading. But this is another added tool that will instantaneously. I'm even thinking, Nils, I don't know if this is a thing with Chat GPT. This is telling me that I need to go play with it in the same way that our audience does. But like what topics? I'm thinking about like what sermon series should we do? Or what should I, and even getting inspiration on speaking to the felt needs of the time and season where you're like in this area, I don't know if you can search for, if it's going to tell you what's trending or searches, highest search results, but thinking about like, this is more of what needs to be talked about. And my voice needs to be, or maybe there is a topic that you're just always going to talk about, whether it's a topic that everyone's searching for or not, and getting more information and insight onto ways that you can address that, ways that you can, talk about anxiety, ways that you can talk about, what might be going on in your city or area. But yeah, sermon prep in a valuable way. And the reason I was thinking about that, Nils, I'm glad you went there. And then I'm curious what some of those other positives are that you see. I remember my first pastor, we had him on the podcast, James Carmichael, and he handed me, he wanted me to read a systematic theology book, right? And he handed me another book that had, a whole bunch of stuff in there. And he's like, so I used to use this, now I use the internet, but I want you to read this book. But I want you to have it. Like, I want you to understand it through reading it. But he's like, but now we use the internet. I don't have to use like this physical dictionary per se, or this thesaurus, right? I use the internet. But it's an additive. It's not something that's replaced anything, and it's not necessarily good or bad. It's agnostic. It's just another way to get more insight to enrich your sermon, your message, what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. And I think about, when I was in seminary, I used Logos Bible software, and it was a CD-ROM. I put in my computer, all the data that Logos had was on that CD. And then they moved to a browser base that had so much more access to more data to help in message preparation. And I'm curious with that software in particular, which is such a valuable tool to so many pastors, how they're going to integrate AI if they haven't already, in helping, because I just think that this technology is going to help so much when it comes to message preparation, and organizational and thoughtfulness tied to that. So I think that's huge. The second thing is, I see a lot when it comes to administration stuff. So I think about, like, create a social media policy for our church volunteers. And what will that create? And what it will often probably create is not something perfect, but something that is basically a policy that you can then edit and make it fit better for your church. Or I think about things like create a media release policy for our youth camp, this summer. And it, has all of these, like, media release things that they just bring the best of into one document for you. So I think the administrative side is going to be huge, of being able to just help. Basically, the assistant is the right word here, where, like, assist you with your administrative needs quickly, without you having to, like, let me go see if I can Google and find a form and then copy it and paste and edit. It actually does that for you, and then you just refine it.
That's right. So, Nils, gosh, so many questions on GPT. I do think that these are the best ways that I see to leverage it. I would not go out and fire your graphic designer.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. I would, because the other thing I'm wondering is if ChatGPT is documenting all these things, right, as being produced by them, I'm going to make the assumption that they're not doing that for the humanitarian reason of, like, this was created by a robot, so nobody's confused. We don't want the liability. I'm going to venture the bet that everything we're doing is still owned by them, and we are actually building their database.
Yes.
Would you say that's probably a fair assumption, that everything that's being created with ChatGPT, we as humans are creating for the owners of ChatGPT?
100%. And they say that if you're not the client, you're the product, or I forget the language people use, but at the end of the day, if it's free, people are using you to be sold to. Now, what's interesting, as they've interviewed the founder of ChatGPT, is they're losing $3 million a day, primarily just because there's so much data that they're having to hold and process through all of these prompts, that their engine responds to. And what he said is that, because people have asked him, what's your business model? How are you going to make money on this? And he said, well, we want to just build the AI good enough so that we can ask it what the best business model should be for it to make money. And it's like, wow, like, that's what's happening, is it's that smart and going to be that smart. Well, they actually just unveiled their first revenue stream, and I think they're charging $20 a month. And you because right now, if you try to log into ChatGPT, about half the time it's full. You're not able to get on. So if you have a subscription, you automatically move to the front of the line of accessing, so you always have access. But yeah, that's what's happening. This is leadership decision making, executive decision making, and we think about how many decisions we often have to make in a day. Well, this is going to make a lot of decisions for us based on a ton of data that's being aggregated, and probably better decisions because of all the data. And like, our minds are limited. This system, the limitations are becoming less and less.
Right.
And so it is it is developing way faster than our minds ever can. And so, yeah, it is mind blowing, what this can do and where it is going. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we should end with this, Nils, because this is wild. We're geeking out about it, right? We're excited, but I've noticed this over the course of our conversation as a listener. I hope that you've picked up on this as well. Not this is new and different, but it's not new and different.
Yeah.
Like we've had this, we just didn't have a podcast to document it, right? We've had this reaction
Yes.
to every advancement in technology, and
Yes.
every advancement in technology has hurt the world, and it has also advanced ministry.
Yes.
And given us an opportunity as church leaders and as Christians to do better ministry. And so I let Nils and I be your guides, right through this new season, but it's not new in
Yes.
terms of what we're experiencing and how the transition goes. It is not new. How the way we can make it new is maybe how quickly we adopt in the posture we have towards this new innovation.
Yes.
And let's not be fearful, but let's go in strong, aggressively, wisely, and let's bring leadership to the space of ChatGPT.
Totally.
Instead
so Aaron,
of being reactive 10 years late.
Yes, 100%. And I've got an announcement I don't think I've shared with you yet, but I want to share it with our listeners. So I had a friend reach out to me who is a genius software engineer in the secular space. He actually used to be the head of product for digital marketer. And he said, I would love to create an AI platform for pastors and ministry leaders, but I'll only do it if you'll find pastors who will use it. So I'm working with him, and it's one of the things that we want to do through this podcast is connect, ministry leaders to good technology. And so, so the product of the platform is not ready yet. I don't know when it will be ready, but I don't think it will be that long, based on what some of the things he's already done in his, secular job. And so, so we've set up a website at ministryassistant.io, where you can go and basically be the first to know when this platform. So you're not signing up for anything. When you sign up, you're just basically signing up to basically know when it's going to be available and get more information on that. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like. I can't tell you, but based on this conversation today and where I've seen technology going, I'm really excited about what my friend is developing, and what I think how that's going to be well structured for church leaders. But this is so new, and this is a way to be kind of on the front edge of this, and I'm going to make sure that it's going to be at a price point that is affordable for church leaders to maximize the opportunities without hesitation or anxiety or fear of where's this data coming from and how is it being used. So that's coming. So go to ministryassistant.io and get on that list to be the first to know. So that's Aaron. Have I shared that with you? Is that news to you?
I think you dropped something about that because we were talking about something else that we'll announce very soon. But it's exciting. We kind of feel like Thanos a little bit. We're going to be coming out with something for Web 1.
Yes,
you already know we got Web 2 locked and loaded with Amplify, who produces this podcast. Our team, if you have any interest or need in that area, our team can address that. So we have Web 1 covered with some announcements that we haven't made yet. We have Web 2 covered. We stay covering Web 2, Social Media Church podcast, right? And then now we're going to have Web 3 covered. So we have all the webs and all the iterations of the web covered. This is where you would want to be.
This is what, and we're gonna, and at the end of the day, we where we see gaps, we're gonna fill those gaps. But where we see opportunities, that's why we're gonna bring people on this podcast. There are great people, others filling those gaps, and companies and technologies that we want to connect you to. So that's what we're doing here. Thanks everyone for listening. You can get the show notes for this podcast. You can get other podcasts, everything, socialmedia.church, and connect with us too. Reach out to us, connect with us on social media. You'll find our handles in our bios there on the Social Media Church website. So go to socialmedia.church for all those things, and we will talk to you again on the next episode.